In a wood somewhere in the north, two men find a house they have never seen before. Inside, two other men are asleep, and hanging above the sleepers on the wall are two wolf skins. That is the whole of the temptation. Two skins on a wall. They take them down. They put them on, and the skins fit. That is the first thing that goes wrong, because the skins do not come off again. Not that night, not the next one, and the men inside them begin to change. They run on four legs. They kill everything they meet in the forest, and they are not pretending, and they cannot stop. And before it is over, one of them has his teeth in the other one's throat, and the other one is his own son. Now, you already know a version of this story. You have watched it in the cinema, probably more than once. A person discovers they can become something else. They are frightened of it for about 10 minutes of screen time. Then they learn to control it. Then it is a gift. Then it is the reason they win the fight in the third act. So go back into the actual myths, all of them, every continent, every century, and go looking for that story. It is almost not there. In the sources, becoming an animal is a sentence handed down. It is a skin somebody stole. This is the mythology of shapeshifting, and it is the strangest agreement in world myth, because nobody agreed to it. Greece and Iceland and Orkney and Ireland and Japan and Mexico had no contact with each other. They told the same warning anyway. And here is the one thing I want you to carry through all of it. There is a single question that sorts every shapeshifter story on Earth. Not what shape, not how, just this: who chose it? Ask that, and the whole map falls into 4 countries. Country 1. The shape is a punishment. A god is angry, and a human being ends the sentence as an animal. Country 2. The shape is a marriage trap. Somebody takes a skin, and a wife stays exactly as long as the skin stays hidden. Country 3. The shape is a loss of self. A man goes into a fury or into a fur, and the man does not entirely come back. Country 4. The shape is a mark. It says this person is standing outside the human community and has paid something to stand there. And running underneath all 4, there is a rule about direction, which took me a long time to see, and which I think is the real finding. When a god changes shape, it is a power. When a human being is changed, it is a sentence. And almost nothing in world myth crosses that line. Start in Greece, and start in the water, because the oldest shapeshifters in Greek myth are not warriors. They are old men of the sea. In the 4th book of the Odyssey, Menelaus is stranded on an island off the coast of Egypt. No wind, food running out, 20 days of nothing. And the person who tells him how to fix it is the daughter of the god he needs. She sells out her own father and gives Menelaus the method. Her father comes ashore at noon to sleep among the seals. Take hold of him, she says, and however hard he struggles, do not let go. Homer gives the list, and the order of it matters. First he becomes a bearded lion, then a serpent, then a leopard, then an enormous boar. Then he stops being an animal at all. He becomes running water, and then he becomes a tall leafy tree, and the men hold on through every one of them. And then the text says the thing I want you to notice: he grew weary. Now this one really is a power. It is his own. Nobody inflicted it, and he is a god. But look at what he does with it. Nothing. He never uses one of those 6 forms to hurt anybody. It is a locked door. It is a man refusing to be interviewed. And when Peleus wants to marry the sea nymph Thetis, he holds her while she turns into fire, and then into water, and then into a beast, which is darker than it usually gets credit for. She is changing shape to get away from a man. And the story is that he does not let go. So keep the tally. In the oldest layer of Greek myth, shapeshifting belongs to the sea, and it is a defense, and the defense always loses. Now the king of the gods. And before the famous list, one fact that deserves to be far better known than it is. In the Iliad, Zeus sits and recites his own love affairs to Hera. He names 8 of them, one after another, to her face. And there is not a single transformation in the whole speech. No bull, no swan, no shower of gold, nothing. Homer knows the affairs. Homer does not know the disguises. They arrive afterwards, and once they arrive, they never stop. He becomes a white bull, and a girl called Europa climbs onto his back, because a bull that gentle cannot possibly be dangerous. For Danae, shut in a bronze chamber, it is gold, and a 5th century tragedy puts it very precisely, the seed of Zeus falling as golden rain. And for Alcmene he takes no animal at all. He takes the exact face and voice of her own husband, and she has no way on earth to detect it. Line those up, and the pattern is not glamour. Every transformation is a disguise, and every disguise exists to remove a woman's ability to refuse. So here is the most powerful being in the universe, and what he uses metamorphosis for is access. And he is never punished for any of it, not once. Io is loved by Zeus and ends up a white cow. And the sources cannot agree on who did that to her, which is itself the whole story. The oldest one, a play from the 5th century before Christ, says the goddess did it. The late handbook says Zeus did it to hide the evidence. Count the transformations in that story. 2. One belongs to the god and lasts an evening. One belongs to the woman and lasts years. His is a costume. Hers is a life sentence with a stinging fly attached. That is the direction rule, standing in a single myth. Which brings us to the most misread shapeshifter in Greek myth. And the thing to notice about her is that she does not shapeshift. Circe on her island, with lions and wolves lying around her hall like tame dogs, because they used to be men. Odysseus sends half his crew inland. She feeds them cheese and barley and honey and wine, and there is something in the wine. She touches them with a wand, and they go into the pig pens, and then Homer writes one line that changes the entire genre. They had the heads, and the voice, and the bristles, and the shape of swine, and then this. But their minds remained unchanged, even as before. Their minds remained unchanged. They are pigs on the outside and men on the inside, and they know precisely what has been done to them. That is not a spell. That is a prison. The horror is not the snout. The horror is the person still awake behind it. So Circe becomes nothing. Her power runs one way only. She transforms other people and keeps her own face throughout, and is never punished either. The shapeshifter changes and pays for it. The sorcerer changes other people and does not pay at all. Hold that line. And there is one book that gathered all of this up, and it is the reason the Western world thinks about transformation the way it does. And it is not Greek. It is Roman. It is a poem, and it was finished around the year 8 of our era. Ovid's Metamorphoses. It is a very late layer. When Ovid writes, Homer is already 7 centuries old. He is not recording a religion. He is building an argument. And that matters because Ovid did not invent any of this. Dana's olden reign is older than him. So is Actaeon. So is Io. What Ovid did was collect them and arrange them and make them mean something. And what he decided they mean is that the change is a verdict. Lycaon, a king in Arcadia, decides to test whether his guest is really a god by serving him human meat at dinner. He is answered before the plate is finished. His clothing becomes hair. His arms become legs. He tries to speak, and it comes out as howling. And Ovid is precise about it. The wolf keeps the gray of the man's hair, the same violence in the face, the same eyes burning. The shape is not arbitrary. The shape is the crime, made permanent and made visible. The wolf shows you what the man already was. In Euripides, 4 centuries before Ovid, Actaeon is torn apart by the hounds he raised himself for boasting he was a better hunter than the goddess. And that is all of it. No goddess bathing, no antlers. In the earliest surviving account, the death is there and the transformation is not. The stag comes later, and when it comes, Ovid gives him the antlers and the long neck and the dappled hide, and leaves his understanding intact. And his own dogs come over the ridge and do not know him. And he tries to shout, "Look, it is me." And the poem says the words refused his will. And up on the hill his friends are calling his name. Actaeon, Actaeon, wondering where he has got to. Sorry that he is missing this. Then Arachne, who weaves better than a goddess and says so, and is left a spider still spinning, with the skill and none of the person. And Callisto turned into a bear. And Ovid writes that line again. Her former mind remained, he says, even when she had been made a bear. She lifts what used to be her hands towards the sky and cannot say a word. Homer wrote that horror once. 8 centuries later, Ovid writes it again. Go through the catalogue, and the tally is exactly the direction rule. Gods transform themselves in order to take something and walk away clean. Human beings are transformed by somebody else for what they said or saw or did, and they never walk away from it at all. Now north, into the sagas, because the Norse material is the one place that actually built a vocabulary for this. And the key word is hamar, and its first meaning is not abstract at all. It means a skin, a hide, the feathered coat of a bird flayed off whole. So a saga can say of a man that he is not of one shape, Igi Einhammer, and everybody listening knows what is being alleged about him. There is a farmer in one of the Icelandic sagas nicknamed Evening Wolf, perfectly civil in the morning. Towards dusk he becomes so unpleasant that nobody will speak to him, and he goes to bed early. And the saga says he was shape-strong. But look at exactly how it says it. It was people's talk, the saga writes, that he was shape-strong. That is a rumor marker, which brings up berserkers. And here nearly everything popular is downstream of a single paragraph. Snorri Sturluson, writing in Iceland around 1225, more than 2 centuries after the country became Christian. He is describing Odin, and he says Odin's men went forward without armor and were as mad as dogs or wolves. They bit their shields. They were strong as bears or wild bulls. They killed people at a blow, and neither fire nor iron told upon them. And then he names them. These were called berserkers. That is the passage. That is the entire foundation. Now read it again, because it does not say what everybody thinks it says. Mad as wolves, strong as bears. Those are similes. In the Old Norse it is one small word, seum, twice, like. He is saying these men fought like animals. And notice what the actual supernatural claim in it is. Not fur, invulnerability. Neither fire nor iron would touch them. Even the name is unresolved. Bear shirt, a man in a bear pelt. Or bear shirt, a man going into a fight with no mail on. Nobody has settled it. There were also wolf coats, elf hesnar, And our oldest surviving mention of them is a war poem from around the year 900. The literal bear arrives late. In a saga composed around 1400, a champion called Bolvar Bjarki fights for his king, except that Bolvar Bjarki is sitting in the hall the entire time, sitting still, doing nothing, and refusing to be moved. And out on the field, an enormous bear is walking through the enemy line, killing more men than any of the king's champions. Then somebody goes into the hall and shames him into coming out, and he gets up, and on the field the bear is gone. And the battle, which they were winning, is lost. The man was in the bear. Calling the man out of the hall called the bear off the field. That is the clearest literal shapeshifter in the Norse corpus, and it is also one of its very latest texts, which is the whole point about layers. And now, the wolfskins. The house in the wood at the start of this video comes from the Volsunga saga, written down in the late 13th century. Sigmund and the boy find a dwelling in the forest with two men asleep in it, and the skins hanging on the wall above them. And the saga tells you what those are before it tells you what happens. The sleepers, it says, had fallen under ill shapes, a curse. Men who can come out of those skins one day in 10, and no oftener. That is what is hanging on the wall. That is a prison uniform. They put them on anyway, and they cannot get out of them. And the same nature, the saga says, went with them as before. There it is again. The same sentence Homer wrote about the pigs, and Ovid wrote about the bear. They are entirely themselves, inside a wolf. They speak in wolves' voices, and understand each other, and make an agreement, because they are still men enough to make one. Neither takes on more than 7 at a time. Call the other if there are more, and the boy breaks it, kills 11, and boasts about it. And Sigmund goes at him so hard that the boy goes down, and Sigmund closes his teeth on his throat. And afterwards he is sick with it, and carries him home, and cannot help him. And then the saga does something wonderful and very strange. 2 weasels come out of the wood, and one of them bites the other in the throat, the identical wound. And then it fetches a leaf, and heals it. And when the 10th day comes, and the skins let them out, they do not keep them. They burn them, and pray that they harm nobody ever again. Hold that image. It is the most useful thing in this entire subject, and I want to come back to it at the end. So who in the North changes shape freely on purpose and gets away with it? 2 figures, and they are the 2 you would guess. Snorri says Odin could change his shape. His body would lie as if dead or asleep, and he would be a bird or a beast or a fish or a serpent, which is not a costume change at all. It is the self going out and leaving the body on the floor. The body is what is left over. And notice where Snorri puts that. 1 chapter after the berserkers, who only get similes. The men fight like animals. The god actually leaves his body. And then Loki, who has the widest repertoire in Norse myth, and who is the closest thing to the modern reading that exists anywhere in it. He borrows Freyja's falcon cloak and flies in it. He fights another god as a seal over a stolen necklace. He becomes a fly, a salmon, an old woman, and the famous one. The gods need to sabotage a builder's stallion, so Loki becomes a mare and leads the stallion off into a wood. And what comes back sometime later is Loki with a gray 8-legged foal, which becomes Odin's horse, and the best horse in all the worlds. Though that one is Snorri's alone. The older poems know that Loki took a woman's shape and bore children. They say nothing about a mare. So there is your free shapeshifter. Now listen to how the other gods talk about it. They never once call it a power. In the poem where the gods sit and insult each other, Odin throws it at him directly. 8 winters you were under the earth as a woman, milking the cows as a maid, and you bore children there. Unmanly, he says, must your soul be. And Loki throws the identical charge straight back at him. They say that on Samsi you worked spells like a witch, and went among men in a witch's guise. Unmanly, he says, must your soul be. The same closing line, word for word. Free to change, never respected for it. Which is a very precise description of what these traditions actually think of the ability. Now go west from Norway to islands where the sea is the only road, Orkney and Shetland, and to the second country on our map. The word is selkie. And here is the first surprise. It is not the name of a magical race. It is the Orkney word for a seal. And the second thing, which I want to be straight with you about, because it changes how you should hear everything that follows. There is nothing medieval here. No saga, no manuscript. The earliest written seal wife story is from 1822. The man who first printed the famous seal ballad said flatly that it was too regular and too well constructed to be very old. And the great Orkney collector said the explanations people gave him for where the seal folk came from must have been imagined after Christianity arrived. So when you hear the phrase ancient Norse legend attached to any of this, that phrase is doing work no manuscript supports. And the story they caught goes like this. On certain nights the seals come ashore and take their skins off, and underneath they are people. And they dance on the sand. And a man from the farm is watching from behind a rock, and he is not watching all of them. He waits. And when they are well away from the water, he goes down and takes one skin, and carries it home and hides it. And a woman comes up the beach behind him, looking for something, and without it she cannot go back. So she goes with him. And that is the marriage. Read the mechanics of it, and it is not a romance in any sense at all. He does not court her. He does not win her. He removes her ability to leave, and then keeps her under his roof for 20 years. And the tales all say the same thing about those 20 years. She is a good wife, she is good to the children, and she goes down to the shore, and stands there, looking at the water, and the seals come in close to the rocks and look back at her, and nobody in the house talks about it. Then one day a child is playing, up in the roof or under a cornstack, and finds a rolled-up skin, and brings it in to show mother, and she is gone. That day. In most versions she does not pack and does not explain, and in some she does not say goodbye to the children. And in the Shetland telling she says something on her way out that the collector wrote down and that nobody has been able to soften since. I loved you very well, she says, when I lived upon the earth, but I always loved my first husband much better. And notice who is telling this story. These are tales told in the farmhouse, by the family the woman walked out on, and they tell it anyway with the theft still in it. They never once edit out the part where the man took the skin. There is a male one, too. In a ballad a Shetland woman sang to a collector in the early 1850s. A woman is nursing a baby and does not know who the father is. And a man rises at the foot of her bed and tells her that he is. I am a man upon the land, he says, and I am a seal in the sea. And when I am far from land, my dwelling is on a bare skerry. He puts down a purse of gold. He takes the boy, and then he tells her the future, and this is why the ballad is unforgettable. You will marry a gunner, he says, a good gunner. And his first shot will kill me, and his second will kill your son. So even the free one, The man who goes between land and sea as he pleases ends the song shot in the water beside his child. And underneath all of it is one object, the skin, something you take off and lay down and can lose, which means the shape is property. And whoever holds the skin owns the person. That is the sentence the seal wife story exists to say. And it is the same object as the wolf skins on the wall in the north. And on the far side of the world, the same story is being told about a fox. China, Korea, and Japan all have a fox that becomes a woman. People like to call that one story that traveled. It is more interesting than that, because the fox does not begin as a seductress anywhere. In the oldest Chinese catalog of the world's strange places, there is a fox at the Blue Hills. 4 legs and 9 tails. And that is very nearly all the text gives you. A bestiary entry, no woman, no marriage, no seduction. And a commentator in the 4th century reading that same line says the 9-tailed fox is an auspicious omen that appears in times of peace. And a lost text of roughly that period gives the latter everything downstream is built on. At 50 years, a fox can take a woman's shape. And 14 centuries later, a Chinese writer fills an enormous collection with fox women, and many are the most sympathetic characters in the book. Loyal, clever, better company than the human wives. So the Chinese fox never settles into a single moral position at all. And the most infamous fox in Chinese tradition, the one who brings down a dynasty, is not a fox in any ancient history. She becomes one only in late fiction, which is worth saying out loud because she gets quoted constantly as ancient mythology, and the novel that made her famous is contemporary with Shakespeare. Now Japan, and the earliest foxwife in Japanese literature, in a Buddhist tale collection assembled around 822. A man in Mino province goes out looking for a wife, meets a woman on a wide plain, marries her, and she bears him a son. And then the dog in the household will not leave her alone. And one day it frightens her badly enough that she loses the shape, and she is a fox in the room in front of her husband, and she runs. And here the story does something nobody expects. He calls after her. He says, "Whatever you are, we have a child together. Come back and sleep here." And she does. Every night she comes and sleeps and goes at dawn. And the tale claims her name is made out of that sentence. Come and sleep. That is a folk etymology, not a real one. But it tells you what the Japanese foxwife story is for, and it is not horror, it is grief. And the Japanese fox then splits in two. There are the white foxes of Inari, messengers of a god who are fed and thanked and guarded. And there are the wild ones, blamed for possession, an affliction that real physicians were still being asked to treat in the modern era. And then the famous one, a court beauty who is really an ancient fox. And notice the date, because the legend is late, the 14th century. And notice what the tradition says about her. Later retellings make her the same fox that ruined a Chinese dynasty and had then come east, which is remarkable. The tradition is telling you, in its own voice, that this creature is an import. The migration is inside the story. Korea is the third point, and the Korean fox has an episode of its own on this channel. So here I only want the comparison. And the honest version of the migration is narrower than people tell it. What traveled was not the fox. Everybody already has foxes. What traveled on trade routes, in Buddhist texts, in imported story collections, is the motif. The fox as a woman, the fox as a marriage. And each country did something different with it, because each needed a different thing said. That is not one tradition, That is a shared tool. But look at the direction of travel in all of them, because the fox stories have something nothing else on our map has. Everywhere else, a human being goes down into an animal. In these, an animal comes up into a person and wants to stay. She does not want the forest. She wants a house, and a husband, and a son, and a name, and to be spoken to like a person. And she never gets to keep it. Every version ends with the shape failing at the wrong moment and the household coming apart. So it is still the same law. She is not punished for being a fox. She is punished for wanting to be one of us. Ireland next, and the saddest transformation anybody has written down. And again the date first, because the date is startling. This is not an ancient Irish manuscript. It is early modern Irish, perhaps 14th to 16th century in composition. And no copy survives in any manuscript older than the 1600s. It is a story about very old gods, written down astonishingly late. A chieftain of the old divine race has 4 children, a daughter, Fiannuala, a son, Eoda, and twin boys, Fiachra and Con. Their mother dies. He marries her sister, and the new wife watches her husband love those 4 children and cannot bear it. She takes them out to a lake and sends them into the water to bathe, and then she strikes them with a druid's wand. And there are 4 white swans on the lake. 900 years, she tells them, 300 here, 300 on a cold strait in the north, and 300 more on the open Atlantic off the western islands, until a bell rings in Ireland that has never rung there before. And now the detail that makes this a masterpiece. And it is exactly the detail we have hit in every tradition so far. She leaves them their voices. You shall keep your own speech, she says, and you shall sing music so plaintive that men who hear it will sleep. It is not a kindness. It is the cruelty. A swan that cannot speak is only a swan. A swan that can speak is a child on a lake for 3 centuries. Then the 300 years are up, and they must go north to the strait, and there the sweetness stops completely. Winter storms, freezing spray, the 4 of them driven apart in the dark, calling for each other, and Fiannuala counting who has come back. And the image the story is remembered for. The sister gathering her 3 brothers in under her wings on a rock and holding them there. 900 years later the bell rings. It is a Christian bell. A monk has come out to the western islands and is calling the hours. And they come to him. And the feathery coats fall off them, and they are human again, and they are 900 years old. And they ask him for baptism, and they die, and are buried together in one grave. And the text says that heaven was obtained for their souls, which is why the ending is not a graft. The 900 years exist to deliver 4 pagan children to a saint with a bell. And Ireland does this repeatedly. In a much older text, Actaeon is turned by a rival into a pool of water, then a worm, then a purple fly. Even the Morrigan, a war goddess who does choose her own shapes, uses them to attack a man in a river as an eel, a wolf, a heifer, and he wounds her in every shape. And she has to come back to him disguised as an old woman milking a cow to get those wounds healed. So even for a goddess, it is a tactic in a fight she is losing, not a delight. Nobody in this material shapeshifts for pleasure. Now east into the Slavic forest, where the werewolf is not a monster from a film. It is an accusation about a neighbor. The word is volkodlak, and its parts are almost too plain. Wolf. And hair, or hide, or pelt, wolf pelt. The thing that is on you. And a poem usually dated to the end of the 12th century, says of a real historical prince of Polotsk that he ranged at night as a wolf, out of Kiev before the cocks crew, and across an enormous distance before dawn, crossing the path of the great sun god as a wolf. And scholars still argue whether that is literal, or whether it is a poet's way of saying a sorcerer prince moved uncannily fast, which is worth generalizing. A good deal of what looks like shape-shifting in medieval sources may be somebody being called fierce. It says his mother bore him by sorcery, and that he was born with a membrane on his head which he wore all his life, and that is all. Call in the chronicle, wolf in the poem, 2 different centuries, 2 different genres. Do not let anybody hand you those as one tradition. And then the strangest thing in the Slavic file, which is what happens to the word itself as it travels south. In 1818, a Serbian scholar compiles the first modern dictionary of his language, and he has an entry for vukodlak, and it does not mention wolves, not once. He defines it as a man in whom, 40 days after death, a devilish spirit enters and revives him, who then comes out of the grave at night and goes into houses and strangles people and drinks their blood. That is a vampire. And the word for vampire is in the same dictionary as nothing more than a cross-reference pointing back to this one. So the word for werewolf did not just drift. It changed sides completely. The man who becomes a wolf became the dead man who will not stay dead, which tells you what that category was always for. It is not a species. It is a verdict. This one is not one of us anymore. And there is one place in Europe where somebody accused of exactly this got to answer for himself, and it is astonishing. 1692, in what is now Latvia. An old man called Thies is brought before a court, and he freely admits that he is a werewolf. And then he tells them what werewolves are for. 3 nights a year, he says, they go down into hell to fight the witches, to take back the grain and the livestock the witches have stolen, so that the harvest will come. He calls himself a hound of God. The court did not know what to do with him. In the end, they did not convict him of witchcraft at all. They convicted him of heresy, which is the sound of a category breaking. The one werewolf in the record who got to speak insisted he was on the side of the village. Cross an ocean, and the same country on our map is waiting in Mexico, under the word Nahuali. The first Spanish Nahuatl dictionary in 1571 translates it bluntly, witch, necromancer, which tells you who was holding the pen. But go to the great Nahuatl encyclopedia compiled by the friars, and the entry for Nahuali opens somewhere else entirely. A wise man, a counselor, a person of trust, and only after that does it split into the good one and the one who does harm. The day sign passage is blunter. A person born on that day, it says, will be a Nahuali, not a person, perhaps in the guise of a fierce beast. Not a person. That is country 4 in 3 words, written down in the 16th century by people who were trying to describe what they found. There is a related idea alongside it, the animal counterpart, the creature born with you, whose life is tied to yours, so that if it dies, you die. It is a genuinely beautiful idea. But the tidy 2-part system you will read about is a framework an anthropologist drew in the 1940s. And in the Maya world, the epigraphers who deciphered the word for these spirit beings in the 80s spent 30 years calling them companion souls. And then one of the men who deciphered it said publicly that they had got the feel of it wrong. These are not benign companions, he said. They are dark forces wielded by sorcerers at court, The reading held. The warmth did not, which is what honest scholarship sounds like. And that brings me to one I'm going to handle differently from everything else in this video. Deliberately. In Diné tradition, Navajo, there is a term that means, literally, by means of it, it goes on all fours. And I am not going to tell you a campfire story about it, for a reason that matters more than the story would. This is not a dead mythology. It is a living belief in a living community, and it sits inside the category of witchcraft. Which means the figure is not a neutral shapeshifter at all. It is a person understood to have done something terrible in order to be able to do this. And within that tradition, discussing it with outsiders is itself the kind of thing you do not do. Diné people have said so publicly and plainly. So the responsible thing is to name it accurately, put it on the map where it belongs, and stop there, which is what I am doing. And it belongs precisely where the map says. Country 4, the shape as a mark, the sign of somebody standing outside the human community, which is, notice, the exact opposite of a superpower. And it is one of the most common meanings of shapeshifting on this entire planet. One last stop, briefly, because it has an episode of its own coming. The jinn of Arabic and Persian tradition. And the root of the word is the interesting part. It is a root that means to cover, to conceal, to hide from sight. Scripture says they were made from fire, and that they exist, and is spare about the rest. The shapeshifting is largely a later popular layer. Traditions warn about snakes in the house that may not be snakes, and in the great story collections, transformation becomes a weapon in a duel. Two magicians changing form against each other faster and faster. A scorpion, a serpent, an eagle, a cat, a fish, a flame, and that is genuine combat shapeshifting. The thing we assumed was everywhere. On this whole map it is there essentially once, and it is late, and it is fiction. So put the whole map on one table. Greece, Rome, Iceland, Orkney, Ireland, China, Japan, Korea, the Slavic forest, Mexico, the desert, and apply the rule. Every time somebody changes shape and it goes well for them, ask what they are. The answer is almost always a god. And every single time a human being changes shape in these stories, it is a catastrophe, and it is permanent, and somebody else started it. The seal wife does not change for love. Her skin is stolen, and the moment she finds it, she is gone across the water without looking back. The foxwife is a household that dissolves. The children of Lir get 900 years of it, and the swans are the punishment, not the miracle. Which leaves the obvious question. If the sources are that consistent, how did we end up with the exact opposite? And I think the answer is that the story never changed. Our position in it did. For almost all of human history, the person telling this tale was the villager, the one inside the house, the one the wolf comes to. The shapeshifter was the neighbor you were afraid of, the stranger with the odd eyes, the woman who arrived from nowhere and married in. So of course the change was a horror. It happened to somebody else, and it happened at your door, and it happened at night. Modern storytelling put the audience inside the transformation. And once you are inside it, it is not an invasion anymore. It is an identity. So the fur that used to mean you had left the human race came to mean you had finally found out who you really were. That is a genuinely beautiful inversion, and I do not want to take it away from anybody. It is also, measured against these sources, brand new. Because the ancient version is not really about wolves or foxes or seals at all. It is about how thin the human shape is. how quickly a person can be turned into something the community will hunt, how fast a name can come off somebody. That is what the retained mind is for in all of them. Circe's pigs, Ovid's bear, Actaeon under his own dogs, Sigmund inside the wolfskin, entirely himself, with his teeth in his son's throat, Fionuala counting 3 centuries on cold water. The horror was never the animal. The horror is that the person is still in there and nobody outside can hear them, which is a very old way of describing something that happens to people constantly, with no magic involved at all. So go back to the 2 men in the house in the wood one last time. They find the skins. They put them on. They cannot get out. And when at last they do get out, on the day the curse allows it, the saga says they burned the skins and prayed they would harm nobody again. Not kept them, not trained with them, not learned to control it, burned them. That is the oldest opinion anybody has on this subject, and a dozen cultures with no contact between them arrived at it separately. A shape that is not yours is not a gift. It is something to get out of.